The Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Odenberg, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Keys. Here. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Present.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Present.
Alderman Aldrich.
Present.
Chair Narayan.
Here.
Alderman Odenberg, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 5 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, February 1st, 2024.
So move. Second. Previous row.
There has been no roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Odenberg. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
Chair Narayan.
Aye.
We have 5 aye votes.
All right. With that, we have approved the minutes. At this point, we are going to take up discussion item number 1, the Detention Facility Oversight Board. I believe, Madam Clerk, that there are some folks online. Are they online or in person, the individuals, the candidates for that board?
These candidates, I believe, are wanting to speak on 199.
All right.
Let me make sure.
Is there anyone present for DFOB?
No. Oh,
All right. So I had asked that the candidates either make themselves available online or before us so that we could properly vet them for DFOB. But if they're not here at this moment, we will circle back on that and take up Board Bill number 199. Alderwoman,
give me one
please.
moment. I can check, but right now I'm not seeing them. Give me one moment.
Sure thing. All right, at this point, we are going to go into a 5-minute recess to allow Alderwoman Saunier. Excuse me, to ensure that the clerks have time.
They said they sent the Zoom link to somebody, so they just want to make sure there's nobody waiting. But Ms. Tracy's coming over. They just want to make sure there's nobody waiting.
All right, are we, Madam Clerk, are you ready to come back before we go back to STL TV? Okay, yeah, no, that works for me. If she doesn't want to talk to us, we can't make her. All right, STL TV, whenever you're ready, we can come back in. All right, the Public Safety Committee is back in session. We are now taking up Board Bill number 199. Alderwoman Saunier, please proceed.
Thank you, Senator Ryan, and members of the Public Safety Committee. First of all, happy Black Everything Month. I'm always going to start my comments off with that. So what we're going to be discussing today is Board Bill 199. I think much of what has happened has been extremely public. That happened in Gravois Park, but also within the last 4 years, this would make the second attempt that a private for-profit entity has tried to come into our city and sell to us commercial surveillance that's, for profit purposes as a solution. And so this bill just serves to set some regulations around the commercial use of drones for surveillance.
And Alderwoman, before we proceed, I see that you're talking about the committee sub. Would you like to put that committee sub in front of this committee at this time?
Yes.
All right, then I will move that we put Board Bill number 199 committee substitute in front of the Public Safety.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so now we are looking at Board Bill number 199 committee substitute. Alderwoman, please proceed.
Thank you. So some changes in the committee substitute. I filed this bill our first day returning from session with the understanding that that would guide and facilitate some conversations. So I really want to thank the Federal Aviation Administration for being great partners. I was able to have several conversations with them as well as the mayor's office, and as well as the police department. And so these changes in the committee substitute serve to make sure that we're okay as far as any federal preemption goes and to make sure that all our bases are covered. One of the main components of the legislation is that it requires you to have a city business license in order to operate drones for commercial purposes. This is not anything new. We already have Chapter 8.02 in our municipal codes that requires that multiple industries such as real estate agents and others have licenses through our license collector's office in order to operate. And so this bill would be adding anyone who had a commercial drone business. This would now be a requirement as well. You'll also notice that the committee substitute amends much of the altitudinal references from 500 feet to 300 feet. A fun fact is that many of the FAA standards as far as safety routes and other things start at about 400 feet or above. So we just went with 300 feet to make sure that we're still within our grounds. And then you'll also notice that we added a definition for business or commercial purposes and also surveillance and updated the definition for drones. Much of the feedback from FAA was just making sure that we matched up any definitions in this bill as much as possible with federal codes. And so the definitions for these things were either came from things that are already in our municipal code or federal codes, including these. And then you'll also notice some amended language around no drone zones, which includes schools, emergency incidents, and critical infrastructure facilities. You'll notice that no drone zones is no longer in your committee substitute. And when you're doing this, we were kind of advising the municipality that it's better to kind of talk about behavior itself whenever you can, rather than like broader language. So it's better to just kind of talk about the specific facilities where you want to put those things in. And then you'll also see a lot of emphasized language in your committee substitute around public safety and privacy. One of the efforts that helped to guide the initial draft of this bill was the FAA's fact sheet. And so that really enforces that a municipality has the right to put some of the regulations that are in this bill in place whenever we're looking to protect our residents' public safety interests or their expectations of privacy. And it also addresses some FAA preemption concerns, again, just based around feedback from the legal counsel of FAA. Oops. Okay, so some of the additional changes to note, again, we removed the language of no-fly zone. We changed the altitudinal reference to 300 feet and above. And then we also, the committee substitute in front of you adds a very specific carve out for members of the press when they're practicing their First Amendment rights, and also makes it clear that this is, not for press and it's also not for recreational operators. There is some standards already at the federal level, which is 49 USC 44809, that set some of those regulations. And then you'll also notice that we added that definition for surveillance and commercial or business purposes. All right, so the meat and potatoes of this bill, a good overview of Board Bill 199. Again, its goal is to regulate the commercial use of drones within our city. And one of the things that would be required, it's already required if you're not operating for recreational purposes, that you get an FAA remote pilot certification. And so that's already in place. And now the expectation would be that you have that and that you also are registered with the City Businesses License Collector's Office. We, again, added some definitions to match up with Federal Aviation Administration rules. And also there's a bill going at the state level around surveillance. And so we really did a deep dig through. This is one of those rare times where the state has alignment with us and also is trying to protect the use of surveillance. So we just wanted to get ahead of that and make sure that should that bill pass and be successful, we don't have to come back and make any major changes. Okay. Again, the purpose and intent of this bill is to set, regulations around the commercial use of drones. Community-based safety regulations are really the core base of it, where residents have an expectation of privacy, and just to make sure that there's no unwanted harassment, no invasion of privacy, no trespassing, and some of the other things that drone surveillance could tinker on the lines of. Like I mentioned earlier, that Federal Aviation Administration fact sheet, this is language specifically taking from them. And so this language just makes it clear kind of the cases when we have the right to put these things in place. And so I just thought that might be helpful for my committee members as you all kind of are looking at a little bit of what helped guide the legislation. Some definitions to cover. Again, much of the language in the Federal Aviation Administration, they don't really say drones flat out. They usually refer to drones as unmanned aircraft, and so we adopted that definition. And then they do also have definitions of model aircraft. So this is just to kind of make it clear some of the deviations of who this legislation is for and who it's not for. These are some definitions. Again, if you all have any questions, I think one of the most important definitions is surveillance, which shall mean the collection or obtaining information pertaining to crimes or wrongs done or threatened, the identity, habits, conduct, occupation, honesty, integrity, credibility, knowledge, trustworthiness, efficiency. Again, this definition are things that are kind of either already in code or they're at the state level, at the federal level. So we didn't really create any of these definitions from scratch. So something that's really important to point out is that many of the state and local concerns are already addressed by laws that regulate ground-based conduct not involving the UAS or the unmanned aircrafts. And so we didn't want to duplicate federal laws. So anything that's already in place for federal regulation, we just kind of left that out of that bill, out of this bill. But of course, those things are still in place, but just no need to duplicate language that already exists. All right. I think this is a key part of the bill. Again, this is the specific language that makes those new expectations that you have your remote pilot certificate license, which is already in place, but also that you're registered with the St. Louis Collector's Office. Another pull from that FAA fact sheet. This language just kind of outlines the times when municipalities can put things into place to protect public safety. So in a lot of our conversations with the legal counsel from FAA, they just really enforced the benefit of in the bill reiterating we're doing this to protect public safety. We're doing this because this is an expectation of privacy, because that's the common thing of where municipalities have the right to put these sorts of things in place. And again, important to know that this is not prohibition, this is regulation. And so some of the examples of kind of what the FAA has given us the guidance to do and things that are in the bill and some of the things that are really important and aimed at protecting public safety and privacy. If someone is operating a drone surveillance, one of the questions that I'm sure you've seen in your email or you might hear is like, well, what's the difference between like a Google Earth image or commercial drone surveillance? And the difference is really that a Google Earth image is not a real moment in time. Usually those were captured months or years before, whereas a surveillance is active live streaming. So you could put it somewhere where you're getting real time footage. And so one of the pieces in this legislation just says that, you know, if you're within 25 feet of another person without that person's permission, that would not be allowed. And again, just reiterating that these, especially the major components of these bills, have kind of been talked about thoroughly and vetted. Again, another protection of public safety. Drones can be used for all types of things, and so certainly they could be used for surveillance, but also you could attach things to drones. And so this makes it clear that no person shall operate a drone that has, you know, any type of weapon or other device designed for inflicting bodily harm or physical dangers. All right. So I think something that's important to consider as we discuss this legislation is, you know, when are those moments where it's the right time and place to kind of put these regulations into place? And so the bill gets pretty specific into what that looks like. I won't go into depth, but I just want to reiterate again how important those altitudinal levels are for consideration. Because again, anything that is 400 feet and above, we really want to leave that up to the FAA, and things below that are more within our lines because those are more in proximity to our residents who we're ultimately aiming to protect. Another key component, and again, a lot of this portion came from direct conversations with our first responders. We want to make sure that if anyone is doing any drone surveillance, that they're not using that to record some of those private moments between our first responders and our residents. And so there is a piece in this legislation that would, you know, outline the operation for emergency. So whether that is, you know, EMSs or police cars. And again, this wouldn't say that a resident could not record those interactions, but it is saying that if you have a commercial drone business and you're using surveillance, you would not be able to record this. And then also you'll see that schools are protected. They have our minors in. It should be a place, you know, there's all sorts of weird and perverted things. And so we want to make sure that our children and our families are protected as well. Another carve out for publicly owned buildings. Just wanted to make sure that that was clear, the purpose of this. We have many publicly owned buildings in our city, whether that's our jails, our detention facilities, our courthouses. And so again, just making sure that someone's not, you know, flying drones up to their windows and seeking to get surveillance in, that those folks in those facilities are protected as well as the staff. Okay. And again, another portion of just examples of kind of language that was given from the FAA to make sure that we're keeping this. I kind of just pull all those things out so that you all could have for reference. This is also in the drive, so if you're just curious about any specific part, definitely feel free to just take a look at this. All right, so exemptions. Definitely want to make it clear who this does not apply to, who this does apply to. So this would not be exempt. This is not something that is for our police department or for first responders. It is also not for members of the press who are doing their constitutionally protected activities. And it's also not for folks who are operating drones for any type of recreational use. So there's specific language in the bill that provides that carve out just to make sure that that's really crystal clear. Okay, penalties. So of course, when these incidents happen, I think one of the things that we can be thankful for is we were able to realize some of our limitations or things we don't have in place. Had the incident in Gravois Park happen, we kind of realized, hey, if we're outside of a park, we kind of don't have many things in there that say what our police department could do. So this legislation would make it okay, would put some penalties in place for people who are in violation of this, a fine from $100 to $500, and then also it gives the authority to the police department to impound, give a citation, seizure, and impound any drone operators that they find that are in violation. It gives them the authority to collect that drone and impound it. And another thing to know is the impounding language was not created from scratch. We simply just pulled language. We have some impoundment language in our municipal code already when there are situations where we can take guns or other things. So we really just pulled that over, copied and pasted that language and adjusted it for drones. And there's the chapter reference if you're curious. Okay, so this is just to kind of get at some of the common questions and things that I've had. Of course, since filing a bill, and I'm sure you all have seen those emails too, these types of things come up regularly. I think a big point to remember about this bill is we don't want private drones without public accountability operating without any type of regulations. And so that's really the motivation of that. And I kind of talked about this second piece earlier about the difference between like a Google Earth and Google Maps and one of the, a commercial for a private entity, but just really understanding that the aim of this legislation is to protect our residents from being surveilled or spied on in places where they have the expectation of privacy without their consent. Okay, so again, concerns about federal preemption. One of the interesting things is we have very little to no state laws or state regulations around these types of things. They do have a bill that's going through their process, but it really, most of what's in place right now falls to those federal codes. So definitely one of the things to remember is in regards to anything recreational, since this bill is not for that, we will be referring to the exception for limited recreational operations of unmanned aircrafts. Again, that's what they call drones. And I've just put that specific chapter here and where you can go and find, if you're curious about any of those languages or things that are in place for recreational use, this would be the place to refer to. And this is just a note on controlled airspace. Again, one of the things that we did discover when the instance went to launch in Gravois Park is because our city is so near airports in many directions, there's already a controlled airspace in places where this type of activity, would be prohibited. And so I just thought it would be a good idea to give you all as committee members a visual image of our city and where that controlled airspace is. And you can go right to FAA.gov and find this, and you can also play around and type different addresses and things into it to figure out where your specific area is. I won't go too much into depth again into this. This is really just meant to kind of explain who the legislation is for, and just really highlights that in many cases, a lot of industries within our city are already like real estate agents or folks who already do this business. They wouldn't have to do anything to be compliant in many cases under this law, because again, this doesn't prohibit it. So like a real estate agent, they should already be registered with the City of St. Louis Collector Office, and they should already have their FAA license. As long as that's the case, they're permitted to keep moving along as normal. And then there's plenty of other industries similarly that kind of do use drones, but they already meet the criteria outlined. I just want to make sure that I thank everyone who has been, such a great partner in the cooking up of this legislation. So first and foremost, thank you to all of the Gravois Park neighbors and residents who were very clear with me as soon as they heard about it. I think maybe I had 4 days before they were like, we want to see some legislation on this. So hopefully they feel happy about this moving forward today, but definitely want to give a shout out. They've been their own greatest, best advocates. They've started doing community organizing. They've made their voices really, really clear. I'm sure we have several emails from them, so I want to thank them. Also want to thank the Federal Aviation Administration. They were so helpful. We were able to have several conversations and really dig through, and it helped give me such a greater understanding of what's within our means and what's not. The president's office, President Green's office, was immediately supportive of the idea of doing legislation around it, and really, and the mayor's office. They were both immediately right on board and have kind of participated in the process of making sure we have something on our books. St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, not just for their role in this legislation, but even in their role in just making it, clear and being available on hand when we suspected that someone might have been launching a project. They were very responsive, sent officers out, and were able to help make sure we practiced everything that we could. And somebody who we don't talk about often, but we all know, Board Attorney Louis Galley, who, great legal mind, was extremely helpful as well. All right, and with that, I can take any questions, and then I also wanted to make sure that I referenced for you all the frequently asked questions on Board Bill 199. You guys have that printout in front of you, but I think this might be helpful as you're going through your neighborhood meetings or whatever community spaces you are. You may get some of these questions, and so you can go pull this right up and hopefully get an answer to some of those most asked questions, and this also is in the drive.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Alderwoman. I do have a couple of questions here, and my understanding is that this is not a finished piece of legislation that you are looking for a vote on today. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm hoping to just have a hearing today to put this in front of you all, have you guys read through. I think one of the best things in the legislative process, it's like cooking, so we might need a little more salt, might need a little bit more pepper. So this is so that it gets in front of you, you get a good idea of what's in it, and you can give me any questions, any feedback, any concerns, and then I will come back next week and hopefully take that vote.
Sure. Just looking through it, it seems like we've spent a lot of time defining surveillance as a defined term. And then we really only utilize that defined term. What I'm seeing is one time here in the bill. Is the purpose of this bill about surveillance, or is it to be kind of a catch-all on drone regulations just in general?
I think it's kind of dual purpose. I think, because the incidents in Gravois Park was the concerns were around surveillance. We wanted to be clear on what we were referencing when we mentioned surveillance, and it was one of the things that the FAA in one of our earlier meetings really emphasized, hey, you want to have a clear definition in that. So I think it's for that purpose, but I think the real purpose is to make sure, even larger than Gravois Park, if anything like this happens anywhere else, the standards and the protocols are clear.
Thank you for that. And, the only kind of hang up that I was thinking of as you were presenting I know that folks like roofers and insurance adjusters, real estate agents, things like that, regularly utilize these drones. And I imagine as time goes on, we're going to see more and more of that, rather than getting a guy up on a ladder to get on the 6th floor or something. If you can just zip a drone up there, why not? So I do have a little bit of concern just on the idea that you do that within 300 feet of a school. I know from looking at a lot of other board bills that we've looked at on excise and cannabis and things like that. One of the reasons why we looked at that particular radius, it's really hard to not, for a lot of places to not be within a certain, my house personally, I believe, is within 300 school. So that would mean that my insurance adjuster couldn't look at my roof with a drone, I guess, under this.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that because it's not horizontal meaning, it's altitudinal. So it means 300 feet above a school building, not anywhere within proximity.
Oh, okay, I see. So it's not like looking at a map 300 feet that way, 300 feet east and west. It's vertical. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, maybe we just want to clean that up, or maybe that's a term of art for people smarter than me. Then the emergency vehicle exception that you have here, page 5, line 3. So if I'm operating a commercial drone, so I'm that insurance adjuster or whatever, and then a police car drives by, I'm in violation of, is the way that I'm reading it.
Well, again, it depends on who you are and what you're operating it for. So in many of the cases, this is kind of an informal practice and not a formal one, but it wouldn't apply across the board because it is just for commercial use of drones that you couldn't be interfering with those interactions. And that was, that would be the case for all first responders, but in many cases, this happens now. Our first responders do sometimes use drones. And so in many cases, it's something that they already kind of have a practice for, and we're just putting it into writing. But it's not meant for anyone, but, should you have a company that is doing drone surveillance where you have to respect that distance requirement.
Okay. Then when it comes to the special events, at page 4, line 7. So I know just kind of offhand, I know from say the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Dogtown, coming up March 17th. Make sure to go. There are really neat pictures that people have taken, that photographers have taken utilizing these drones. Mm-hmm. I understand some of the push-pull there, but I see one of the things that you had struck out was unless the operator's granted written permission by the permit holder. Is there any particular reason that was struck out? I'm just trying to think of how we could ensure that we still have cool pictures of all these different neat events that we do throughout town.
Yeah, again, it's still the case that if the permit holder gives that clearance to do it, but one of the things that FAA recommended and that the mayor's office and some folks preferred is that if it's already a practice, we don't have to repeat it. So it's already a practice that usually if you want to photograph or record an event, it's usually the event sponsors that are reaching out to you, and the city already has a process for that. So I just didn't duplicate the language, but that will still be the practice.
Okay. Then, I think this is probably the case for just about anything, but I've never hired a commercial drone company to do anything.
Me neither.
So I'm just curious if you had looked at any of the prices of getting photographers or anything like that utilize these drones. I'm just wondering, is $125 fine the cost of doing business, or is that an actual real is it a slap on the wrist or a real punishment?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I would give them the maximum fine possible. I would do anything I could to, encourage people to honor this legislation and the boundaries within it. But, municipal code limits us to go up to $500 for those fines. So I just really use that as the reference since that's the maximum that we can go.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And with that, I'll move along. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and thank you, Alderwoman Sanye, for this very informative presentation on this bill, first of all. So a lot of my questions that I had coming into committee today were answered, but I did want to have a specific ask about the first responders, and I know we said police department, this is not applicable to them, but what about private? And I'm not sure if they're considered private or still first responders, but I know in some of my ward, we have the secondary and sometimes third and fourth layers of policing, metro policing, WashU policing, NIS, those different entities like that. Does this not apply to them as well? Since they're not named, I know you have the police department named, but.
Yeah, so the police department is named, and then also we are toying around some language to just broadly outline all first responders.
Okay.
And so I think that should cover that.
Right.
It's a little bit harder because there's so many different names for secondary means of policing. Yeah. So I think next week's hearing, I hope to have some broader language as first responders, but we just are in clarification to figure out the best language to use that. But definitely, because not just police department, EMS, firefighters, we just want to make it abundantly clear. And I think when we switch it to first responders, hopefully that covers anybody doing any work under.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was the only other question I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving to Alderwoman Keys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions at this time.
All right. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alderwoman Sonier. I just want to also thank you for this very informative presentation. I appreciate all the questions and all the answers in the presentation. Really, the only question I have, and it's kind of a tangential question. I'm glad to hear that you're working within the existing structures as far as the license and permitting agreement. I know that we all know it's not perfect.
Right.
So do you have any sense of how, if this will, how many applications they would get, or like it would, basically, do you know how long it takes to get a permit now? And if this would require much more of a lift for the already, the special events department that already is probably not moving as fast as some folks would like to get their permits?
For sure. So I did just have some brief conversations with our license collector's office about kind of the process. We didn't talk about the process broadly. I kind of just asked, have you ever had any folks who are using drones for commercial purposes? Like, what do you have? And so honestly, that office was kind of the one who were like, yeah, there's plenty of industries that already do it, and kind of pointed out that under this legislation, most of those entities will already be covered. It wouldn't acquire additional steps because usually those industries are already registered with their office, and FAA already requires that they have a remote pilot certification. So in most entities, it wouldn't require any additional work. Now, when you get over to city events, like such as Cinco de Mayo and other things that we have, I don't know how long exactly that process is. I think we know once it hit our office how long it takes, but usually they've been at work some time before that. But I don't anticipate it would add, anything additional, except when that person when the event holder is submitting their license, they usually make indications at that time if they plan on hiring a videographer or photographers. And so now they will also indicate if there was going to be anyone using any drones for those purposes.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I have for you.
All right. Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Also want to echo comments from previous colleagues. I think this information was very informative. I know there's been a lot of things going on with drones in the Gravois Park neighborhood, in which you and Alderman Shane stepped up really quickly to try to figure out how we can do something not fast, but make sure that it's right. I would just, I think things to think about as it moves is kind of what Alderman Ryan said as far as like events, because I could just think about like in the 14th Ward, how we do like for the culture event, and it's like people that don't have a business license and they just, come because they just want to document it and be like, give it to Ohan so that she can have it. And probably what Alderwoman Velasco said, probably try to figure out. I know previously working in a license collector, if it's like a one-day event, they have to get a special license for that. If that needs to be like a change code for the license department office, and also, how would that work for like a special event? If it have to be through the special events office, or if it have to be through the person who's planning the event to approve it, if which entities will have to do that. But outside of that, I think you've done a lot of great work on this and you've done your homework, so thank you.
Thank you, Alderman, and I'll make sure, but by the time we get to our next meeting, that I've got clarification on what that process looks like. From my understanding, I think it would be their usual process, and they would indicate all the means that they plan on using, but I'll clarify that and make sure I have that for you next week.
And I just have one more question, because the more I'm thinking about it, the less it's making sense to me. So with this, the 300 feet and the various ranges, so how is that calculated? That's calculated in 3D space. It's not like the plat. It's so if you're 150 feet up and 150 feet to the right, you use the trajectory, or like, I'm just lost.
I mean, I guess there's a way to figure it out. I know that many folks who use it already do, because it's already set by FAA. So many of their requirements, when people go get that remote certification pilot license, all of their license are kind of set to all natitudinal requirements. So I'm not, with this legislation, like redefining what that is. That's kind of the parameters that FAA gave. And that's also why I tried to put that flight control link on there, because also if you go visit that site, it explains it a little bit more as far as the altitudinal references and kind of why and where that applies.
I think that we should probably take a look at defining how that, putting that definition, whatever the definition may be, putting that definition in this, because if I'm the municipal judge that's trying to make a determination on this, I'm going to be 300 feet is 300 feet, and you were within 25 feet or within 300 feet or whatever it may be. And if there's different measurements that are terms of art in the aviation world, I totally get that. I just don't know them, and I want to make sure that whoever's looking at this in the future is looking at it the way that you intend, rather than just getting out a tape measure.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll just send you some links too that may address that, and then we can talk about if you think that language should add to the. I would just flag for us again that FAA indicated not duplicating things that they already have in place. So I'll send that to you, and then we could totally talk about that.
Yeah, or even just to add in that like all references to distance are measured under the FAA regulations of distance, whatever it may be.
Okay.
And with that, does anyone else have any further questions? All right. Then we will open it up to, do we have any written testimony?
Yes, we have some written and we have some in-person testimony.
All right. Well then.
Also, I have the police department from Chief Tracy, so if you want me to read that.
If you could just get that to the clerk, and we'll just enter that into the record. And that is pro or against, do you know?
Pro and support, basically just saying, hey, we support this legislation, kind of need it for our means to have the authority to enforce should these things come up in the future, but it is already in a drive.
Okay, perfect. Then, yeah, at this point, we'll go to oral testimony here on this. Madam Clerk, if you could just call the people who have signed up.
The first person we have is a Mr. Gene Wall.
Chairman Ryan, do you want to have everyone get sworn in together?
Yeah, I'll swear them in as they come. Mr. Wall, if you could please come up.
First, I'll say
All right. Well,
To be alive. Years old.
Mr. Wall, if you could,
How old and you're young.
Mr. Wall, if you could please raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you have 3 minutes, sir. Please proceed.
First of all, I'd like to say, why are you trying to water down this bill with your stupid questions? This is a hearing, okay? We've been in St. Louis since 1947, when Harry Truman was president, before your grandfather was born, and we're still here today. I don't appreciate drones invading my privacy, okay? For any reason. You got all kind of stupid exceptions. You say, well, insurance adjuster would have to climb on a roof to check out my roof. So what? They've been doing it all the time. This is a total invasion of privacy. That's all I got to say. And if this is America, I fought in Vietnam. What's your military record? Huh? I'm asking you, what's your military record? Huh?
Well, sir, we don't really do a question and answer here, but you do have 2 more minutes.
I'm proud to serve for America, and I'm proud to stand up for America and put my life on the line. And you're too chicken to tell me that you have no military record? You are a horrible alderman, and all I can say is this is an invasion of privacy. We don't need it. We don't want it. Tashara Jones sent them a letter saying cease and desist, and they'll come try to sneak their way in. And people like you say, oh, well, we'll let you come in for a day to see what it's like. Absolutely not. I'm just fed up with ignorant people like you that try to water down a bill. That's all I got to say. It's an invasion of privacy. It should not be allowed. Bye.
All right. Thank you, sir. I just want to state for the record, no one has voted anyway on this. Just having a discussion on the... All right, sir. Well, thank you for your testimony. Do we have any other testimony?
We have Mr. Jake Lionfields in support.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we have what Mr. Dale Sweet, who's in support.
Thank you, Alderwoman Sanye.
Will you, do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, some of whom I'm quite acquainted with. And I'm here to support Board Bill 199, its committee substitute, and the other reasonable changes that the Alderwoman might make to her bill before the committee takes the vote on it, before it goes to the floor, it goes to Room 100. And I'm here in support because I'm a 30-year resident of the city of St. Louis. I reside on the 3500 block of South Compton in the Graveway Park neighborhood in the current Ward 7. And I also work in the city of St. Louis. I am extremely concerned, as many of my neighbors are, and as you all should be, about this sort of use of technology. And over time, we've had things, telephones, cars, cameras, all kinds of things, thermal imagers, where the police can see inside my house to see if I have a grow operation. Is that okay? Is that not okay, right? And the examples are everything that we can possibly imagine. A drone flying over Tam Avenue during an event, counting the number of participants and so on. Is that anything different than someone who's up at a hot air balloon counting people in a quadrant, right? On the other hand, however, if you all were to open these curtains here out onto Tucker and Elliot Davis or Andy Banker flies a little drone up there and look at there, Alderwoman Keys is texting. Look at there, Alderman Aldridge is eating cashews or something. And they're on the public dive. They're right there. They're right now. Is that an invasion? It sort of is. Now, if Elliot Davis wants to come in here and watch, if he wants to stand across the street with a pair of binoculars, I think that's just fine. Now, turning to this neighborhood surveillance in our personal lives, right? Can someone, and this caught my attention at a neighborhood meeting we had in Gravois Park, where a person said, I'm single, I live alone. Someone can fly a drone into my yard and see whether I'm at work, whether my car is in my garage, whether I can be assaulted, whether my house is capable of robbery because I am at work, and so on. It's macabre. And then, there's all the examples. Can someone fly a drone against my bathroom window, my primary bedroom where I'm sleeping, maybe, right? But should they be able to? I think we should regulate it as much as we possibly can without offending federal law or certain preemptions. And it appears, and I applaud the Alderwoman and her legislative staff for trying to whittle those things out. I don't think that this particular latest specter of a drone operator...
That is your time. If you could just finish up your...
Yes, of course. I support 199. Mr. Chairman, I urge the committee for its support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. All right. Next, go ahead.
Next, we have Jake Lionfield in support.
Thanks.
All right. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for our Alderwoman who has done a lot to respond to community concerns around this issue, as has Alderman Cohn. So when we heard about this drone scheme in Gravois Park in mid-December, I and some neighbors started a petition right away because we were rightfully alarmed by someone who has no meaningful connection to St. Louis deciding that he was going to fly his private for-profit drones over our neighborhood in a completely unaccountable fashion. We posted that, and by the way, he did that with, next to no public engagement. And here we are 2 months later, he's still done next to no public engagement. By contrast, in talking with our neighbors, we've had 4 canvassing sessions, 3 public meetings, and lots of emails, calls, texts about what we want and what we envision as real public safety in Gravois Park. That conversation has been influenced by existing policies, by consulting with our elected officials and our neighborhood association and businesses that are along the northern edge of Gravois Park. We've done the work. And our petition has garnered over 213 signatures, and I'll happily submit that for the record. About a third of those signatures are Gravois Park residents, but 2/3 of them are not. And so while there's a couple dozen people in this room talking about this bill, there are hundreds of St. Louis City residents who are expecting action on this measure. And I just wanted to highlight a couple things that are that we specified in our petition that we want to see happen. First, we noted that no public engagement has taken place, as I said. Second, we noted that this drone operator has provided no clarity on the data gathering or metrics for success, which is alarming. There's also been no assurances on privacy. We also noted that there's been no public support in the last several years for increased unaccountable private surveillance. For example, in 2021, we had the city overwhelmingly oppose a spy plane proposal. So there were the following calls to action. First, we wanted the city to do everything in its power to stop SMS Novel's attempts at unaccountable surveillance, and we've appreciated the mayor, the president of the Board of Aldermen, and y'all's help in doing that. Second, we want to see strong privacy and oversight measures for both private and public surveillance systems. I know this bill only gets at private surveillance systems, and we should continue the conversation after this bill passes to make sure that we're addressing public surveillance systems as well. Third, we want to see an investment in real public safety. those neighborhood meetings that I talked about, we talked about what real public safety could look like in Gravelly Park. Nobody asked for more drones in that meeting. And instead, we refer the Public Safety Committee to the People's Plan, which was, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. It was passed by a coalition of organizations who want to see transformational approaches to public safety in our city. And the People's Plan...
That is your time, if you could just finish your thought.
The People's Plan asks you to promote universal housing, ensure government transparency, equitable taxation, and decriminalization, among other things. And then finally, we ask you to report back. So we appreciate this hearing. We look forward to next week's hearing. For your time.
Thank you. And the next individual?
We have, I believe it's pronounced Waya Humric, I'm not sure, Humricus?
All right, sir, if you could state your name for the record.
Is this on? Okay, wonderful. Wyatt Humrickhouse?
All right, and do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. My name is Wyatt Humrickhouse, and I am a renter on California Avenue in Gravelly Park neighborhood. I've lived there for 6 years. I'm also a graduate student in St. Louis. I go to SLU right now. But I care a lot about St. Louis, and I care a lot about Gravelly Park specifically. I love what Gravelly Park has to offer the rest of the city, and then I have a niece and I have a nephew that both hope to grow up there. Today, I came to testify in favor of Alderwoman Saulnier's Board Bill 1. As a resident of the Gravelly Park community, I know that we believe reasonable regulation should be codified to ensure that our basic human rights aren't violated. And these rights are the right to privacy, to security, to autonomy, and as well as the right to have a say in how we are monitored and policed. So thank you, Alderwoman Saulnier, for quickly sponsoring common sense legislation to protect our community. I continue to urge city leaders, members of this community, to put equitable public safety on the priority list, and I hope St. Louisans will continue to resist private policing measures as an answer to our city's public safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone further?
Yes, next we have Mr. Keith Rose
All right.
in support.
Mr. Rose, if you could raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth to the best of your ability?
I do so affirm.
All right. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when I first read the original draft of this bill about a month ago, I actually put on my calendar to come here and testify in opposition, because even though I've spent more than 10 years working on surveillance issues in St. Louis, I was involved with a group called Drone Free St. Louis as far back as 2012. I still, when I read this bill, was a little concerned about some of the things it did not contain. And so the fact that I'm standing here in support should tell you how appreciative I am of Alderwoman Saulnier and Ms. Chelsea Murta and the work they've done to improve this bill through the committee sub. I think it's wonderful. It addresses almost every single thing that I originally saw with the bill that was a concern for me. Things like privacy issues, issues for press and them being able to operate drones to be able to do their work. I do think that the committee has brought up some really important questions today, and I'm happy to see that everyone's still working through the problem so we can make sure that we address this issue, but do so in a way that doesn't create future problems. I would recommend that you look further into that 300 feet issue, because when I first read the bill, when it first said 500, I also thought that it was side to side, to the sense that it might even be 500 feet around LRA properties, right? So looking at that and defining that better would be really helpful for people who are trying to interpret it. I also would really encourage the board to put an exception for public employees engaged in public duties In the past, we've seen in other places that bills that were trying to stop wiretapping or other surveillance were actually used by law enforcement to arrest people who were filming them in public. So that would be a simple thing to add to just make sure that people's constitutional rights are protected and that we don't have to waste dollars on litigation for that later on. I think that would be a really just easy things to add into the bill. Additionally, I did hear conversation, especially from Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, about maybe officers on secondary duty and other first responders. I want to encourage the board that as you're looking at defining that, thinking also about the bill that Alderman Aldridge and Alderwoman Velasquez has been working on for surveillance oversight through something like CCOPS, and making sure that we don't create a donut between people who are working for the city and people who are private entities, because there is kind of a gray area where people might be in secondary employment. And so I would just encourage you that you're making sure that there is some sort of overlap, or at least not a gap between the two, so that we don't see, for example, private companies hiring police officers to get around this kind of regulation and get around that regulation. So I would appreciate that.
That's your time. If you just finish your thought, please.
No, that's it. So I just want to encourage you to vote yes on this bill and just continue working on it because it's so important.
All right. Thank you. Madam Clerk, anyone further?
We have no one else.
All right. Now, if we could just acknowledge the written testimony.
Yes, we have a total right now of 41 in support and 2 in opposition. Did you want all names read? They're all in the drive.
If they're in the drive, that's sufficient. Then at this point, Alderwoman Saunier.
Okay. I just want to thank you all. And again, I really want to thank folks who took the time to come out and testify today. I'm always, throughout this process, you could be watching Netflix or the new reality TV show, or with your kids, or studying, or doing anything, and you're taking the time to engage. And that is how we make sure that we're passing legislation, for and with people. And we can't do that without you all's participation. So I just want to make sure I thank you all who came out. And of course, I want to thank the members of the committee. You all are very, you pay attention to details, you ask questions. I know this was sort of, for some of us, a brand new topic, and maybe one of our first times as a city really digging into the weeds and figuring out what it is that we can and can't do and what's in the best interest of our constituents in our city. So I just want to thank you all for being willing to explore this new topic for me, and for allowing me to, pass legislation to not just, protect the community that I directly represent, but to protect the entirety of our city from people who want to come in and exploit us and fearmonger us to do so. I just want to make sure I thank you all. And again, thank the mayor's office, thank SLMPD, thank FAA, and just really make sure whoever's watching this can see what a cohesive, collaborative process this has been, from grassroots community organizing all the way to the executive's office. And hopefully we have more models of this type of process.
Great. And again, just to be clear, it's your intent to hold this in committee today?
Correct. It's my intent to, and also to be clear, to take a vote next week.
Sure. No, we can add it onto the agenda for next week, certainly. All right. Then at this point, does anyone have any announcements? No? Okay. I will move that we excuse Alderman Oldenburg for necessary absence.
So move.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Previous row.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we have excused Alderman Oldenburg. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second. Previous row.
All right. With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Previous row, but if you just want to adjourn because Shameen was not here. Right, exactly.
No.